Welcome back. Today we're going to put up some tall walls. So this wall is a 16-foot wall, and it is the wall that'll be on the deck side of the house and face the back of the property. I didn't actually film the raising of this wall just because I was really focused on getting it up, and because a couple of my neighbors came by to help provide some muscle and just didn't want to waste their time, so I didn't actually get this on film, but I am going to talk through it. I built this wall in 4 sections. So the very first section was just a 4-foot section at the very end on my left there, which had nothing but studs. And then each section after that was a window door section. So that first opening is a sliding glass door on the left, and above it's a picture window. So that was one section of wall. We built that on the ground. And then Tom, my neighbor, who you saw in a previous video, he helped me raise that one. And it was really right at the limit of what we could do on our own. So another of our neighbors was around and was happy to come by and help for an hour. So he helped us raise the other 2 sections, which was definitely easier and safer and a bit more controlled with 3 people. So because the height of the wall was 16 feet, we needed to be able to raise it into position, but we couldn't do it as it sits because the mid wall is only 12 feet away. So we really had to raise these walls perpendicular to where they were going to go, and then we spun them into place. The easiest way that we found to do that was to get one end of the wall in place and put a pivot screw so that you could then pivot the entire wall into place. And of course we had a snap line that we were going to, and it worked out pretty well. We didn't have any real trouble. I only raised it with a single top plate, and then when all sections were up, we put a double top plate up, which straightened out the entire wall. And of course we braced it to keep the wall plumb, but also bracing across the diagonals for each of those sections when we were raising them, in order to keep it laterally stable so that it stayed square as we were raising them as well. And then, as you saw, I built the window boxes and cripples that would define the window rough opening after the wall was up. I did that for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted to have less weight when we were raising the wall, so any little bit helps. But then I also didn't want to commit to the position of the windows until I saw them up and could really visualize, how the sun would be coming through and how the light would be coming through. So now all the window boxes are defined, and I'm going to start building in place the tall rake wall that will connect the mid wall and this 16-foot wall. That mid wall is 12.5 feet, so at 3.5-inch pitch, you're getting about 3.5 feet for every 12 foot of horizontal travel, which this is a 24-foot room across, so all that makes pretty good sense. On the lower side, if you remember, I built these rake walls on the ground, a frame of them, and then raised them in place and finished by just adding the studs. Here, because of the height, it was just easier to build the entire wall in place. Again, using the math for the calculations, it's going to be dead on, and you need to confirm that with your level and stuff. But other than that, it's definitely an easier way to go. I was able to build this entire rake wall with a window in a day, and other than having to go up and down the scaffolding 30 or 40 times, really didn't pose any problems. As I mentioned in an earlier video, any wall over 10 feet requires blocking, so I'm going to put blocking in here. This is at 61.5 inches, just sort of a random measurement, quite honestly. But then, because these walls go up to 16 feet on the high side for the rake, I'm going to put in a second row of blocking as well. The way that I have found I like to do these rake walls is to do the shortest stud on the left, the tallest stud on the right, and then the diagonal top plate. Once those are in place, it defines the space of that overall rake wall. And then next I move to the most middle stud, and by doing the math and figuring out what the height should be, all you have to do is make sure that the stud is plumb, and then you nail the top plate to it, and then the top plate should be in the perfect position for all of the remaining cuts for the other studs. So these are the horizontal runs for the studs that I'm cutting. So this is 80 inches, 96 inches, etc., away from the wall, the horizontal measurement away from the wall. And then I know that the shortest stud against the wall is 12 feet 2 and 7/8 inches, and so I'll just add that to the rise calculations. So I'm putting in my 3.5 inch pitch, I'm putting in my run of 80 inches, and that'll give me 23 5/16 inches of rise. So I'll add that to my 12-foot 2-inch stud and get a stud length of 14 2 and 3/16. But always remember, if you're measuring on the short side of the stud or the long side of the stud, in this case I'm measuring everything to the short side of the stud. I am using a building calculator app. I don't love it. I don't like having it on the phone. It's hard to see in the sun. I had another building calculator, a dedicated building calculator, but it was a cheap one and it didn't have an auto off. And so it was just always dead because I didn't always turn it off every time I used it. So I'm going to get a better version of that because it's just nice to have a building calculator on hand that's not your phone, in my opinion. So now I'll just do the cuts on those. You can see I've marked an S, and that's because I'm indicating that this is the short side of the stud. I do that just as an extra checkpoint. It always reminds me, yes, this is the way the blade needs to go when I'm cutting it, and so it prevents me from miscutting a 16-foot board. The other thing I'll say about these 16-foot boards is, and anybody who works in carpentry knows this, they're twisty. You don't get a lot of dead straight 16-foot boards, but that's where the blocking comes in and helps straighten them out, and it doesn't really impact the length too much, but you do have to wrestle with them just a little bit to get them straightened up when you're putting in the blocking. Now I can put all the studs in on my marks, and I'll nail them all from the bottom, and then I will go up top and nail them all in place and check each one for level just to make sure that we're right and they are falling exactly where I want them to. And again, the position of the top plate is defined by that first middle stud, so it just makes putting these in a little bit easier, and it gives you more confidence that they're in the right position, along with the corroboration of the level. So we also got much of our trench dug. It's got to be 5 feet deep for our electric service. We did run into some pretty big rocks, so this trench got rerouted 2 or 3 times before we could find a path around the bedrock in this area to get us up to the road. So it took about a day longer than we thought it would to get it dug, but this is just one step closer to having our electric service out here, so that's exciting. Here I'm actually laying out, I'm not doing anything with it yet, but I want to lay out the spacing for the hallway between the great room where I'm standing now and the bedroom section, which is on this side of that passageway. And this will just, again, confirm the door location and make sure that I have enough space for doors to swing and things like that in order to get through that passageway and then ultimately down into the basement. Now I'm putting together the header for the passageway between the great room and the bedroom section of the house. All headers are done pretty much the same way. This is also a 2x6 wall, but as we get into the interior framing of the house, I'll be going to 2x4 walls. Another nice thing about building this myself is that anytime I come to a passageway like this, or the windows, as I mentioned above, like I'm rethinking or at least confirming that it's exactly what I want. In the case of this passageway, the plans called for a standard 32-inch door. I expanded this out to 34 inches because I have the room, and I'm not yet convinced whether or not I'm going to have a door in this passageway or if it's just going to be an open passageway. And in either case, I wanted just a little bit more room so that we could make that decision. If it stays as just a passageway, I felt like the 32-inch opening would be a little bit light of what would be comfortable, so being able to expand that sort of on the spot and make those decisions is very nice. Again, this strapping really comes in handy when you're trying to cinch these, especially these tall twisty studs together, and make sure that your connection between the king stud and the headers are really tight. Now I'll add blocking to this side, same height, 61.5 inches for this first row, alternating between the line on either side of the blocking for ease of nailing. And then I put in that second row 70 inches higher than that. This will really just stiffen the wall in the long run, and again remove any of the remaining twist from the fact that they're just long studs. So in general, I think this is just a good practice. Alright, now that we have a little bit more of the space defined, we can give you a little bit of a tour. So this is the tall wall, this will be the deck side wall. Those 2 sliding glass doors will open out onto a deck on the back side of the house. We'll also have another deck that comes off of the bedroom section. Again, that's a 16-foot tall wall on the back, be 3 picture windows at the top, 2 sliders on either side, and probably a set of double hung windows in the middle there, which should give us an awful lot of glazing for passive heat in the winter, and also just a lot of beautiful light. So as I mentioned, this is the passageway from the bedroom and now into the great room, so you can look up into those picture windows and see how those are going to be. Slider there, picture, and another slider on the end. And as we walk towards this section, this will be kind of the dining room. We're going to put a wood stove in the corner, about where that ladder is right now, and we'll have a couple of those tall windows on that side. Moving this way, this will be sort of the living room area, and we'll have a TV up on the rake wall up there, and it'll blend in with the dining room area, and there'll be an island in the center separating out the kitchen. This is going to be the entryway, but I'm actually building out another section of entryway once we get the backfill done. And when we come in, all of the roof here will remain vaulted, so it really gives you that sense of height. And as you're walking into the living room, you get the, I guess, the most sense of space that you can from this particular design. However, this section on the left is going to be kitchen, and it will have a drop ceiling, and it'll be the top of that ceiling will be even with the top of the wall on the left here, so it'll be about a 9 foot 1 inch wall, or I guess ceiling height, 9 foot 1 inch ceiling height. I guess probably 9 foot once we get the finished floor in. So it'll be a good, comfortable ceiling height so that we can add lighting and things like that. That'll be a bit nicer for the kitchen. And then on this side, we'll have a guest bathroom and a closet, and then move back into the passageway into the bedroom section, which will give us the opportunity going into the bedroom on the upstairs or going down into the basement for the other rooms. That's where I'm at. Thanks for watching. See you next time.